Welcome to the Gold Standard here on the 440 Sports Network. I am Braden Gall, and we are brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. I am joined today on the show by someone who's covered this Predators team for a very long time and knows more about it than most humans in this city, Kayla Anderson. How are you? Good to have you.
Hey, great to be on with you, Braden. Man, it's been a while since, the days where we were all kind of together at Bridgestone Arena. When that pandemic hit, it just feels like we all kind of went in our different directions, but we still follow and love to cover the Preds. And you know me, I'm a big hockey girl, grew up with the sport, so always keeping my eyes on those Preds.
So I got a lot of stuff I want to ask you today. Do appreciate you jumping on here. Emma's a little under the weather, so appreciate you filling in here. And we're going to have some changes coming to the show, probably a new time slot starting next week, so stay tuned for that. Subscribe, Lower Broad Hockey. The chat room, very alive and well, even during the offseason, full of excitement. And special shout out to Kevin. Posted some very personal stuff, dealing with some health issues on that message board. And just wanted to say, Kevin, thank you for the kind words, and that it's great to have you sort of in the community. So get that out of the way here. You've covered this team and this sport for a while. I'm curious, do you have like an origin story around hockey? Like, I came to the sport with this player or this team or this moment?
Yeah. So just a little background. I'm from the Pacific Northwest, at Spokane. So not the western side. I'm from the eastern side. We're very close to the Canadian border. And I grew up in a town called Spokane, Washington, and we actually have a great WHL team. And they just won the Western Conference, actually, the Spokane Chiefs. So I grew up in what we called the Boone Street Barn. It was this old rickety arena. And I just, from my youngest childhood memories, remember going to the Boone Street Barn and rooting on the Spokane Chiefs. And they've always been able to kind of put players in the league. Maybe one recent that you would know that had a long-standing career is still going is Tyler Johnson. Played for Tampa Bay, was with the Chicago Blackhawks for a while recently. So they're kind of known for putting guys, the WHL. It's a good league, and they filter guys into the NHL. So I grew up with the sport. My brother actually played all the way up into high school. And so I would go with him on those fun travel teams. And so we traveled all the way up to Medicine Hat and all of those different places in Canada with travel teams. So I've always loved the sport. I actually wanted to play when I was younger, but my mom and dad said, no, we're going to pass on that. And then they let my brother play. So that always stuck with me. But my moment in terms of the NHL where I finally got to cover hockey at the highest is when I got the job in Columbus, Ohio. I was there before I came to Nashville, Tennessee. I was there for 3 years. And the moment that I got to really experience hockey at the highest level was there. And it was really fun. John Tortorella at the time had taken over that second year, and they had some playoff runs there. So it was fun to cover guys like Seth Jones, who is now currently with the Florida Panthers, and Sergei Bobrovsky, who is currently with the Florida Panthers, and guys like Ryan Johansson, who played for the Preds. And so it's been a fun journey, and everything's connected. It's amazing years down the road that you still follow a lot of those players from your first stop.
I've asked a lot of humans in my life just about, like, how did you, like, where was your origin moment? And no one has ever said the Spokane Chiefs, so you're one of one in that conversation. Here's a follow-up for you. Who is more fun and enjoyable to cover, John Tortorella or Peter Laviolette?
Okay, so that's a great question, Braden. And I might not have a popular answer on this, because while I did cover Peter Laviolette for a couple years here before they changed coaches, I covered John Tortorella when he was hired. And we had a sit-down interview the day he was hired. And a lot of people, I don't think, understand who John Tortorella is off the ice. They know of him as the hard-nosed coach that is strict with, how he develops players. It's his kind of way or the highway. I sat down with him and had such a great conversation. He had coached with the Vancouver Canucks prior, so he knew all about Spokane, Washington, and we kind of were able to connect on that level. And ever since, John Tortorella has been a guy I could reach out to, or when I would bump into him when they play the Preds, I could sit down and talk with him, and he'd check in on me. He was on my he was actually a guy on my resume that if they needed a resource, he was said, put me on your resume. So I've got a different type of take on John Tortorella when it comes to it. And he was so freaking entertaining, Braden. Like, I can't even tell you the amount of stories we would have when he would step up to the podium. Everything from like looking at the sponsor coffee cup of Tim Hortons and saying, "What the hell is this?" And the media people in the background saying, "John, that's our sponsor. Like, you can't do that." The stories that I could tell, he was definitely the best to cover, but there was always something dramatic going on, and he was not afraid to call out the media.
I don't think that's a surprising answer at all. I think every answer to that question is the other one, not Peter Laviolette. Jeff says, I'm not going to do the voice here, but what up, Kayla? From Jeff. Good to hear from you. Predemption says, once in a blue moon, I make it for a live show. Good to see you, Predemption. And there's my guy, Kevin. So there you go. Even at the dentist listening to the show. How are you, Kevin? Hope glad to hear your story. All right, quickly here. Milwaukee loses in 5 games in the second round. I'll call it the second round for those that want to. It's more than that, but don't look at a drunken AHL hockey bracket. It's just completely hammered. But look, I think it's unfortunate. We can have a conversation around Carl Taylor and the fact that he hasn't really gotten many real serious looks on the NHL level, and the fact that the Milwaukee Admirals, despite lots of talent and great regular season teams, do not necessarily play as well as they should all the time in the postseason. I don't know if any of that matters. If you look at all the players that performed, you look at Fedor Svechkov with huge moments and production. You look at Ozzy Weisblatt with big moments in production. Joachim Kemmel with big moments in production. Stastny got some big. The fact that those guys got 2 series, 10 games worth of playoff hockey, where they were put in a position where I would call it simulated NHL playoff hockey, but that's as close as you can get. And they produced largely. There were some bad games and some bad moments, but I think the story should be, look, these guys, got 10 games of playoff experience, and all of them are better equipped for camp next year. I don't know what's your take on the Milwaukee Admirals losing again a little earlier than maybe fans expected them to in Milwaukee.
The key thing, though, to take away from that, and you can, like you said, Braden, you can pick apart the playoff, runs that they've had. They are getting there, though. And I think in AHL and WHL, whatever it might be, it's hard to be consistent. It really is. To get back there consistently and get to the top, it's hard to do. And Milwaukee has done a really good job, Carl Taylor in particular, like you mentioned, of continuing to develop the talent. And it's not always going to come together in a deep run. But when you get that type of production out of the players you're supposed to get production out of, that is a positive sign. I know you mentioned someone in particular, Spencer Stastny, who I think Preds fans have been following for, past couple of years, got the call up last year before getting hurt. I like the trajectory he is on, especially for a 25-year-old defenseman who, great skater. I think at some point, maybe even next year, you could see him making the roster. He's taken the right steps to get to that spot. And I think he's got the experience now too, when it comes to that, and also a little experience at the NHL level. So you have to like what you've seen out of the production of these guys over this last season. And then a little bit of the playoff experience always helps. You'd like it to go a little bit further. And I know Milwaukee loves their team up there, by the way, too. They've got a great following. But we're looking at these guys to eventually in the next 2 years come up and produce for the Predators. That's the point where the Predators are right now. I don't think they're at a point where you're like, okay, we got to sign all these old veterans like we just saw last year. We got to start developing our own players and seeing them shine at the next level. And we might have to wait a couple of years for it all to come together. Yeah. But if we believe we have the coach, we might just have to be a little bit more patient with some of these guys who are developing down in Milwaukee.
Yeah, and I've talked to Carl about this a lot. There's a lot of AHL coaches that have to view their role through the dichotomy of team success versus player development. Sometimes those are at odds with each other, and there's a tension there, and AHL coaches have to deal with it. I've sort of, through this particular moment, I have kind of come back to the point where I'm like, I don't know if I'm a diehard Predators fan. Sure. anything that happens in a playoff run is like house money, but I don't really care about the outcomes of the Milwaukee game. I want Fedor Svechkov to gain as much possible meaningful experience as possible. And that's a thing that I've landed on now in this run. Just like I wanted to see Askarov play as much as possible, in playoffs when he was there. It's because the team is now not good and they need these guys to become good. I am now looking at it differently. I look at it more from a development standpoint than a team success standpoint, because when you have 6, 7, 8 first-round picks that all are going to try to be fighting for minutes and time in on the big club in the next, let's call it 18 months, 2 camps, let's say, I don't really care if they lose in 5 games to, I don't like it, but like, it's not what matters to me, I guess. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
You're not wrong on that. I completely agree with you. And I think it's interesting your take on that, because you said, maybe I didn't think about this 5 years ago. I came here to Nashville to cover the Preds after their 2017 run. And there was so much hype and so much excitement in the city around this team and what they could do. And the years after, it kind of started just to diminish little by little, because you kept the core there. And while in the moment we were all like, yeah, keep the core, keep all these guys, like we can see them, making another run. It was almost like I didn't even think about what was developing. I don't remember having conversations on podcasts or on news too about the farm system and what young talent was about to come up. We didn't have those conversations.
They were trading it for Ryan Hartman.
Absolutely. Good old Ryan Hartman. Exactly.
Luke Cunnin.
Exactly. We didn't have those conversations, but Braden, we have reached a different point in terms of talking about the Preds and the future of the Preds, because we are now saying, look, the development is the most important part. The youth movement has come. And we have to, I think, as fans and as people who talk about the Preds in the city, realize this is the reality now. Like, it's not going to be probably for long that we're going to know every name on this roster.
Yep. All right, Sinkers Beverages. I got a question for you about the cup. I got a question for you about this past season and the summer coming up. So we'll continue to do this. If you want to jump into the comment section, please do so. We're live on Wednesdays. We're going to have a different time slot coming up, so some changes. Sinkers Beverages, of course. Sign up for the In Crowd. Award-winning liquor store, 4-time liquor store of the year, as voted on by you, the Nashvillians, the Nashville Scene, and the Post. And of course, they have an award-winning craft beer fridge, the best craft beer fridge in the city. Fantastic local brews in there, and some great ones from all over the Southeast, whether it's Birmingham or Asheville or whatever. They got great options in there. And obviously great wine selection, bourbon selection. Sign up for the In Crowd. Search Uber Eats over the weekend. Do not, of course, drive if you're at a party. We all know this. It's pretty much table stakes at this point, but you can search Uber Eats, Sinkers Beverages, and have the booze delivered directly to your house. Let them do the driving. You can do the drinking. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, open 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Wednesdays today through Sundays, not Mondays and Tuesdays. So don't ask me to go have a dinner or a lunch with you. Not you, Kayla, but anyone listening perhaps, because I get those messages all the time. Hey, you want to grab lunch? What about Tuesday? Shotgun Willie's. I'm like, no, you don't. It's not open. It's only open Wednesdays through Sundays. Pitmaster Bill, award-winning, also the best brisket in the city, American Black Hawk Farms Wagyu beef brisket. It is the best in town, so go check them out. Okay. First of all, it looks like we are headed towards an Edmonton, Florida rematch. Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl trying to become the next guys that were the number one pick type of guys to sort of cement the Ovechkin and the Crosby and the Taves, and like they're the next ones that are trying to do it here. Obviously, Florida is just so much hockey. And I don't know if you can beat them, but are you on board with the rematch? Do you like it? Are you excited about it? I'm actually okay with it because I think it'll be a hell of a series.
I actually am too. I'm not always for rematches, and I get sick of teams real easily. Like, okay, this team's back in it. That kind of an attitude. I am not when it comes to these two teams, Braden. First and foremost, let me bring up a note, because I don't think I realized this until I did my research. But the last time a Canadian team has won the Cup was 1993. 1993, Braden. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to give away how old I was, but I wasn't.
That's about when I fell in love with hockey, because that's when I was watching the Rangers with like Messier and Richter and Graves, and like that's NHL '94 for Sega was right around the corner, you know.
Sega. Yeah, it was the Montreal Canadiens to be exact. I mean, as Canadian as you could get that won it. Just an interesting note, because we're talking about Edmonton could very well be back in the mix. So I'm actually really torn on this. I'm excited for the rematch, but I'm torn on who I'm rooting for, Braden, because
I'm rooting for Edmonton.
Yeah, so I'm starting to go that way. And the only reason why I like the Panthers is because I covered Seth Jones and I covered Sergei Bobrovsky, both with the Columbus Blue Jackets. So I always like to root for guys that I've covered in the past that I like, that were great to cover. But it will be a fascinating rematch if this is indeed the case, because you've got Florida, like you mentioned. I mean, look, this team plays fast. They're so physical. My dad called me the other night. He's a big hockey fan. He's rooting heavily for Edmonton. My grandfather settled in from Norway, from Winnipeg. He went to Winnipeg. So my grandfather's Canadian. So my dad seems to root for the Canadian teams always. Sure. And he texted me the other day and said, oh, this Florida team just gets under my skin. They just play such like scrappy hockey, and but I'm like, Dad, that's what hockey is.
It feels very American. It feels like a very American hockey team.
Right. The identity is very clear with what the Florida Panthers are. And I salute Paul Maurice and what he's done there, because he's really been able to find the right chemistry and the right guys to make it work. And I think that's why it does work. You have your stars, but then you have guys like Seth Jones that come along late in the process who don't need the camera on them all the time, but do the job that they're supposed to do. I think I heard a quote from him saying, we're all created in terms of the locker room. We're all treated equal. Like, it doesn't matter if you're Matthew Tkachuk or Seth Jones or Bobrovsky. You're all created.
So Paul Maurice is holding his stars and veterans accountable, perhaps the same way he would hold his younger players accountable, perhaps?
Sounds like it. Yeah.
Just an observation. Just
imagine that. And then on the other side, Braden, what I love about Edmonton is, you've got the guys that you clearly know about, right? The Connor McDavids that we all have oohed and awed over all of these years. But the guy that has caught my attention is Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. He has been, in my eyes, just a really key player for them in the playoffs specifically. He's kind of always there, like Johnny on the spot, whether it be assist or a goal. And then you mentioned Leon Draisaitl. Like the offense is there for this team. They can also play defense, and their special teams has been really good, especially in the postseason.
I just like all the new, right? Like McDavid's played in this league for 10 years, and he hasn't broken through yet. Canada as a story would be new. Florida won last year. I certainly would root for Ekholm. I know there's other players on the team that people hate, and I get that, and that's fine. But Ekholm is such a, and honestly, if you look, I think Adam Bingen and I were talking about this on the subscriber pod from a couple weeks ago. It's like, if you told me something major happened with the team, and I could get one like 5-minute conversation with a guy off that roster, there's very few people that would be ahead of Mattias Ekholm for me when I wanted that story. Pekka would probably be number one, but that's not fair to anybody because he's Pekka. But I'll ask you about who your favorites to cover in just a minute. But I think it's hard not to root for him. Again, Canada, new, all that stuff. And being from the Pacific Division is not as offensive as if it was Dallas. Like, I wouldn't be rooting for Dallas.
Right.
But I do think it's an important lesson. And I'm curious if Preds fans are going to take too much of this, because there's a lot of, you got to have a top 5 to win a cup, got to have a top 5 to win a cup. And I've been grappling a lot with on the show, like, what's it worth to you? Would you give up a cup championship to have like 10 or 12 years of like really awesome regular season hockey? And in Dallas's case, 4 trips to the Western Conference Finals and 1 trip to the Stanley Cup Final. What is that like worth it to you? And I don't expect anyone to have a clear answer to that, but Dallas has done almost everything perfectly in terms of building rosters, and everyone is trying to replicate what they're doing from a draft standpoint, from a free agent standpoint, trades, etc. And there's still a good chance they're going to go 3 straight years without getting to the cup. So I just think it's a lesson in even the best who are doing it the best. Still, it still is really, really hard to win a championship.
It's the biggest, in my eyes, and I've had this argument so many times with people. It is the hardest championship to win. It is.
Yeah.
It's the hardest championship to win for the fact that postseason hockey is just different. It's there's a lot of it goes into the teams have the momentum, like maybe at the end of the season, and they carry it in. You saw that with the Preds run in 2017, but anything can happen, and the matchups can completely, throw things off as well. A lot of it has to do with goaltenders getting their hottest in the postseason, as part of that is maybe even the UC Saros conversation, where maybe UC hasn't been as great as he needs to be in the postseason, as good of a goaltender as he is. It just has to all work together. And that's a great point with Dallas. They have done so much right. They've added the right players. They have the right identity going. But then you match up with Edmonton and boom, there you go. It's kind of like not going to happen.
All right, Sinkers, Beverages, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. I got a question for you just in general about the entire season and how it unfolded. And I don't know if your opinion has changed or evolved between the time that like the team is eliminated and the end of the year. And then we have that weird period of time where apparently Barry Trotz is just out there scouting first-round picks, apparently. And then we have one of the most anticlimactic, uneventful press conferences in the history of the organization that went for, a 27-minute Barry Trotz opening statement and over an hour where nothing happened. And now we've got a few weeks of playoffs happening. We're a week away. Next week is the combine coming up very quickly. The draft's going to be here real fast.
Yeah.
Has your perspective on what happened in the season, and this is layered here, but it's what happened in the season, the Preds' response to that, Barry Trotz's response to that, in large part keeping everything intact, and then deciding on a strategy moving forward. Has your opinion evolved at all? Has it changed at all? Is it still like shit's broken, we got to fix this at the end of the year? Like, how has your journey been in looking at the team and what the decisions that are coming and the decisions that have just happened?
So when I initially listened to that presser with Trotz that you just described, and when I heard they were not making any changes, my first thoughts were, what? Like, you're telling me that they had this type of awful season where the offense was not good at all, 31st in scoring, 32nd in 5-on-5 shooting percentage. I mean, we could go on and on about all the logistics of it, but it just wasn't good. And because I think a lot of people were hyped up about it being good, because on paper, you added those names like Jonathan Marchessault, like those guys that have been successful in other places. And you're saying, okay, they might be above 30, but they're going to come here and add some of that scoring mixed with some of these younger players and be veteran leaders. And it just all went the opposite direction. I think that's what made me think at the end of the year when he said, we're not making any changes. I'm like, what? Like, you would think you would have to make some sort of a change. Now, over the last few weeks, Braden, I've broken things down. I've done some, research and read some articles, even looked at different teams and how they've decided to do things throughout the season. And I can kind of see what Barry Trotz is doing, because in my eyes, maybe it's a thing where we've got to keep the staff together. We've got to give Brunette another chance, because now maybe they are switching the philosophy of going and signing all these older veteran players and actually now just saying, hey, we have to take in reality and know that we just got to start developing. And until you give Andrew Brunette the full advantage to do that, you're just not going to see what you're going to get out of him. And I know he has not proven that in the past. Like, he was with the Florida Panthers where he took over the team. It's not like he was necessarily developing them for a long time. He was in Minnesota as an assistant. Like, he helps with the development, but we haven't seen it on his own. But I think Barry believes in him that much to think he can do that. But now that's what I'm expecting them to do, Braden. I'm expecting them to actually develop these young players and admit to everybody, the fan base, that this is what we're going to have to do. And it might take a couple years and we're going to have patience, but that's how we're going to have to build this team back up.
It feels like a messy process to get to where this team maybe should have been in the first place, is how it kind of feels to me. And that's probably a different perspective that I've gained, like you, over the last, because like I asked Barry at that press conference about, like, well, how do you know when you're supposed to stay the course versus when you are need to be convicted in something that you believe in? Like, how do you know? And he's like, and I didn't like his answer, because his answer was like, well, you got to go with your gut. And I'm like, okay, like, do you just like talk to it? Like, how, like, and I get what he's trying to say, but ultimately it felt like he deviated from the plan because he had all this opportunity to sign some stuff, and they made a late month run into the playoffs. And I think this is not new. This is not new. So I'm not breaking ground here to our audience, but it felt like he deviated. He got tricked into something that maybe, false sense of security, whatever cliche you want to use. And now he's realizing, well, no, Andrew Brunette is the right guy. I'm convicted in Andrew Brunette's system and the scheme. That's the direction the NHL is going, is in this faster paced, sort of up-tempo kind of offensive, style of hockey. But, and I've got all these prospects, and I haven't really given up on any of them yet. I've got a bunch of draft capital. My thought is like, again, I've come around on and I know a lot of our audience is happy about this, that I've come around on I think they need to lean into being bad, and nobody tanks, but let your young players play, and don't go sign a big free agent unless he's under the age of 25 and is going to be a center for the next 10 years on your team. Just see the thing through when you made the move to hire Brunette in the first place. And when you took over for David Poile, just see the thing through. You still have all those pieces in place, and then be honest with the fans about it. Yeah. Say we are going to give these guys, and so that means don't spend on big free agents unless they're cheap. It means don't make a trade for a main player unless he's young. And it means probably trade as many picks to move up to get as many high caliber prospects as possible. And I don't know, I probably felt that way at the end of the year, but I was also probably more in line with, go ahead, we need to fire everybody,
Right.
But I think I'm okay with what they're doing. To your point, I see what he's doing, but I think now they need to actually follow through with it instead of zigging and zagging like I think they did last summer.
And I think it's hard sometimes, right? And Barry Trotz, this is his first go at being a general manager. Barry Trotz is a brilliant hockey mind. I firmly believe that. We've seen it just in terms of who he's coached, but I mean, he's been around the game for years. So I think, though, when you're in a new role and you're managing, it is different, because you might have that false sense of, okay, this team at the end of last year, when we made this run, this team could go far next year. We just need to add some really big pieces or some key veterans, and that could make it complete. Not so fast, like Lee Corso would say, because it's all about the fit, Braden. It's all about getting the right free agents, and not always is the big name going to fit with the guys that are already there. And we saw it a lot with how they did not finish in terms of scoring last year. I think a lot of the forwards, you would see they're just waiting on somebody else to make a play. It's like, well, that big name make a play. Hey, why can't the other big name? Like, it was almost like there was so many names there that they were waiting on each other to make the play or to finish. And you can't have that. You have to, as a general manager, which I think Barry will learn after this season, is you have to get the right mixture of guys so that everybody is playing at the same level, and knowing that at any point they've got to make the play or they've got to make the move or take the chance. So I think it is a learning lesson that I hope it is, because if not, this will be an even longer rebuild. But I think you're right. I think you push that reset. You're honest with the fans about it. I think fans will get behind you, just being honest and saying, look, it might take a couple of years, but we're really excited about the youth of this organization. And by the way, we have 3 first round picks, and maybe they package up and go up and get a little bit higher. But I think they could do some really good things with what they have in the cupboard. But you're right. They have to now commit to it.
Yeah, I'm big on trading. What is it, 23 and 26? Is that right? I'm big on trading, and 35. I'm big on trading 2 of those picks or 3 of them to get up to like 10, 11, 12 and get the guy who falls, because there's going to be somebody who falls out of the top 10, and you already have 5. So you're going to get a top 5 guy, And then there's going to be somebody, Martin, McQueen, I don't know who it's going to be. Somebody will fall out and be at like 11, 12, 13. And as they're falling, you jump in and grab another top 10 center.
Yeah.
Now I'm feeling good about how we could maybe restart this thing a little bit faster. And then you just got to let them all play. So is there a move at all is there a player or is there a move that you would say, because it sounds like you and I kind of both agree on what their strategy should be in the summertime.
Sure.
But is there an exception to that rule in your mind at all? And I'm not saying like, hey, this is the guy they need to get. I'm just curious if there's a type of move that you'd be okay with.
I was actually going through the free agents, and what's so hard about free agency is you are going to get a lot of guys that are 29, 30 plus, right? Yeah. The youngest center that I was looking at that is somewhat productive as of last season, and he kind of had his biggest season yet, is Poos Suter from the Vancouver Canucks, the center there. 25 goal season for him, and again, he's 28 years old. Like he's going to be 20. Like, so that's still a player that's not below 25, and other than that, like you're getting a Sam Bennett who is 29 years old currently with Florida, which could be seeking to go somewhere else after this season. Matt Duchene, who's with the Dallas Stars, who's already been here, who's 30 years old. I mean, it's when I started to really look at that, I was like, Braden, I just think there's not even anybody worth right now going and trying to roll the dice on, because you already went and signed those guys last year.
I agree.
And you got Marchessault, which they could trade. Marchessault does not seem to be extremely happy here either in terms of his post-season comments about Andrew Brunette. He was pretty honest, but sometimes, you need that honesty in a locker room, and we'll see if he stays, but you kind of went and got those guys already last year.
Go get a young right-handed defenseman who's got some negotiating rights. I don't know. Trade him to Toronto. Here we go. Michael Gallagher in the comments. By the way, some stuff coming from Michael Gallagher on Lower Broad Hockey soon. Watch out if Brady Martin falls out of the top 10. I'll let Michael be the expert on the scouting reports on this, but he is largely graded out as a top 10 prospect. And if you do read the scouting report on him, it does read like a Predators player, like all work, all like, and I think about the Blackhawks, the way Kane and Taves brought two different types of skill to the team, both equally talented and high level draft picks, but one guy and different sizes here. And I'm not talking about body type, but like Kane was the super skill, finesse guy who could score a ton and create a bunch. And Taves was sort of the two-way center that was willing to be the leader at all times. And I think if you can get like a Hagens, and I don't know if he falls to you, but if you can maybe go up and get him at 3 and 4 and then come back with a Martin, you're getting the super skill scoring guy and the glue 200-foot guy. And I like both of those players. I don't know how reasonable it is that they could go up and get Martin could be like the pick at number 7 or something like that.
Sure.
So
and that's what's always so fascinating about the draft, right? We just don't know what exactly except for if it's a legendary player at number 1 or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that's how you have to start thinking about building though, Braden, is exactly that. Like how can we get guys early and then get them into this system within a year or two, playing together, producing together. The mind shift is going to completely shift if I'm Barry Trotz.
Daniel says, excuse me, watching the Hurricanes and their inability to make changes to their strategy, isn't that going to be the same exact issue Burnett's going to have in the future if he's the same kind of coach? So here's my thing. I have two reactions to that, and I don't know if Daniel's going to like my response. My first one is Carolina maximizes their talent and has delivered a lot of really great hockey and deep playoff runs for their fans. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater on that right away. And I don't know, so far, Andrew Brunette has not shown a lot of ability to adapt and evolve, but that doesn't mean that's not what's going to happen this offseason. And I don't think we know that definitively yet. If he comes out next year and they have a third straight slow start and it's clear that they've not made any adjustments and the veterans are being, they're not being held accountable the way the young players are, and the offense is slow and scoring. Like, if all the same stuff's happening, there's going to be a quick leash.
There has to be, Braden, because you're right. It's been hard because you got that first year where they, all the drama happens and, the end of the season happens. And so it's like, who really is this team? How much did, Andrew Burnett really do. And I think he did a lot in that second half to help this team skyrocket to where they were and to make the playoffs. But then there's this year and you go the complete opposite direction. But then you can ask yourself, well, is that because they didn't really, just go with the youth and they had to sign all these other players and that mixed up, what this team was? You had in the offseason, I think you signed a whole bunch of players and they were all over the age of 30. Currently, I think you have like 10 plus players on this roster who are 30 plus.
It's a very old team.
You can't play that style of hockey that Andrew Burnett wants to play with that many 30 plus players. So I think now that's why you tear the walls down and he's given a second chance, but he's given the chance and like, we've got to now see you work with these younger players and we've got to see them develop throughout the season.
Yeah, we started to build the house. We got a little ahead of ourselves, and then we tried to do like an extra renovation and add a second story. It didn't work, and now we've got to tear it back down to the studs. Josh says a coach has to think about winning a year at a time. A GM has to think sort of a few years in the future. I think that's correct. Josh, always good to hear from you. All right, Kayla, before I let you go, I just, you've covered this team, as you said, since right after the Cup run. Same question to you. Something big has happened. Good or bad, I don't know, but something big, and you need a couple of minutes, and I give you access, unlike the Predators will ever do, to all players on the roster, and you can get like a 6-minute sit down with one person to sort of explain what is going on with the team. Again, it's not a bad thing necessarily; it could be good, but just it's a big story, and you need someone with nuance and who's articulate and is going to give you good answers. Who is your favorite interview in that setting of your time on the beat?
You want to know, this might come as a surprise because it's not the biggest name, but Anthony Bitetto was amazing when it comes to that stuff. Anthony Bitetto was like, the blue collar, not everybody knew exactly his name. He wasn't the best player on the team, but Anthony Bitetto, when you needed a soundbite, he was there to give you it. And I really appreciated that because not all the times when things were rocky in that locker room, you could go to any guy and expect them to give you the time. And I just felt like he always had the right attitude. He was always willing to, talk with you for a minute. And so he was always like my sneaky favorite go-to. Always loved Austin Watson. I thought he was really great with the media, usually, at least with me. By the way, I ran into him the other day and had a huge conversation about hockey.
Oh, yeah?
So that was really fun. Yeah, he's still here in Nashville. He's still playing. He's with Detroit.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, he had some. He was just talking about the game and just as you get older, how much work goes into keeping your body in shape. And I give a lot of credit to him. He's gone through a lot of things in his career, and he's still out there getting it. He was coming from playing golf, and I ran into him at Walgreens, so that was really fun.
That's very random. Your Bitetto is my Matt Irwin.
See, and I see what I'm saying. Okay, so Matt Irwin, I get that.
Very good. I did a whole Smashville Live for a full hour with him, and it was like one of the best episodes we've ever done.
Isn't that funny how the guys with not the biggest names sometimes are the best talkers, though?
Yep.
So,
what's the name of the dog?
Oh, this is Red, and Red has to be on every podcast sitting next to me. So if you saw my camera shaking, my apologies, because it is my Red Lab, Red, who is doing that. But he has to be by mom's side everywhere he goes.
You're not going to name the dog Butch?
No. So Red off of Shawshank Redemption.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just assumed. Have you had a dog named Butch?
No, I haven't, which is the Cougars mascot. If you guys are wondering, it's the Washington State Cougars mascot. I have never had a dog.
Butch T. Anderson. It's a great name for a dog.
You know what, Braden? The next dog I get, or maybe the brother to Red, maybe I'll name that after Butch T.
All right. Well, yeah. And I'll trade you a dog to be named later in the deal for a first round, for a top 10 draft pick. Give me, what about some moments, and we'll wrap up with this.
Yeah.
Is there a singular experience that stands out to you from a coverage standpoint that can kind of take fans behind the curtain of like what the organization is like, or the players of the team in your experience?
Well, the first thing I wanted to say, I'll get to the run in just a minute in terms of the playoff run, But I was lucky enough when I was in Columbus, I did a weekly thing called Ice Chips, where I would go behind the scenes with different players every week and get to know them better, do some fun things in terms of maybe on the ice with them or pick their brains. And so then I continued it for a couple of years when I came down to Nashville, called On the Prowl. And I got to do some really extraordinary stories with these Preds players. I remember one specifically, PK Subban still has to this day the Blue Line program. And, they're teaming up with law enforcement here in Nashville to bring in kids and kind of learn what these, policemen do and all of that at a different level. And I just remember, PK being a part of that and something that really holds true to him. I know not everybody loves PK, but he put a lot into that. And I saw that firsthand when I got to cover some of those stories. For the first run that I went on here after 2017 was that next season. And I remember I got to travel to Colorado when they played the Avs, I believe in that first round. And that was so fun. Like the day-to-day grind that these players have, like you had to do exactly what they were doing because you were up early for skate, you were interviewing after, and then it was, later on that evening, you were going and covering the game. And I just remember that was the start of Colorado's Up and Up. And that arena was electric. And just the whole arena was shaken and you had the whiteout and everything. But I just fondly remember having so much pride in covering the Preds on the road and at home. Because it's a lot. Like people don't understand how crazy the run is that when teams go on that run, how much it takes out of these players and the people that cover the teams, on the road and at home. That was one of the most spectacular things that I've experienced. And I remember Sean Henry came and gave me a Starbucks coffee before one of my live hits because I was so tired. And he said, "What do you want from Starbucks?" And Sean, who I love, went and grabbed me a coffee. So that was one of my fondest memories of, covering the Preds in the playoffs.
Nate says, I got a picture with Potato after a game once because I was drunk and didn't notice his handler said no to the picture. Well done, Nate. Power through.
That is hilarious.
Nate, just tweet through it, my guy. Just tweet through it.
Exactly.
Kevin says, I honestly don't think anyone in Milwaukee that's a forward should have been in Nashville this season. So left-handed defenseman maybe could argue. I think I disagree with that, actually.
Okay.
I think Fedor Svechkov, what I wanted to see from players was not necessarily, once the season was what it was not that I wanted to see like greatness. I wanted to see just the first step. Just show me the first step that you belong here, that it's not too much for you. And it wasn't too much for Zach LaRue. It wasn't too much. Now, I don't know what, Spencer Stastny's dealing with. Like, unless he's come out and said, I thought he was going to, but I don't know if he has. And maybe that was a factor in whether or not he was being called up or back and forth. Sure. But Zach LaRue and Fedor Svechkov in particular, and I thought Matthew Wood, while he looked a little like he was a deer in the headlights, the fact is, like with two main pieces, and I think Evangelista is a little bit different, but he's kind of in the same group. Just show me that you are not blown away by this, and then work on your game in the offseason and come back and let's see what you can do next year. And I think Svechkov and LaRue in particular, 2 first-round picks who need to be a part of the team in the future, I thought showed that. And lots of the defensemen proved that they are good depth pieces. I don't know if anybody proved that they belong on the top 4, but a lot of those guys prove that they are very good quality depth pieces. I think that's okay. I don't think that's a terrible step of, like, I don't think that removes the progress or the prospects or the farm system. I think it's okay, actually. So
I do too, especially like, what do you have to lose in terms of letting them play? Like, you have to get that experience at some point, especially if you want them up here sooner than later. And the best experience is real experience. And they might not look like where they need to be right now because they probably aren't, but just getting that can do wonders. I'm telling you, that kind of experience, just putting them in the moment and getting the jitters out of your way and saying, hey, I've played in an NHL game. Like that can do wonders for a development. It really can.
And Kevin's clarifying here. His comment was Svechkov was already in Nashville. I'm saying Stamkos and Marchessault didn't take up a spot for any prospects. I agree, but you know who did? I could argue that Gus Nyquist and Tommy Novak did, and those players are no longer here.
Nope.
All right. Kayla, thank you so much for joining. I am hopeful that we are able to do this again very soon in the future. And of course, we're gonna have a new time slot coming up next week. We'll be on Wednesdays, but we're gonna go to 1 o'clock live. So make sure you get that down on the calendar. Go to YouTube, turn on the notifications, etc., etc. We'll be on the podcast app, of course, immediately thereafter. And give us a 5-star review. If you do not give us 5 stars, you are a hater. And so we do appreciate that. That's how people find us. Nashville Predators. Not a lot of shows out there covering this team the way we do, who are people on the ground in the locker room. Emma's doing great, but if you want to reach out and tweet at Emma something classy, everybody. Emma. Something classy at Emma, that's fine. Tell her that you're thinking about her. She'll be back next week. And again, 1 o'clock next week, a little different time. But otherwise, go subscribe to Lower Broad Hockey. Go get some barbecue from Shotgun Willie's and get all of your beverages at Sinker's Beverages. Kayla, thank you so much for hanging out. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Braden. Thanks, guys. I had fun.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out. For Kayla, I am Braden. We will talk to you guys next week.